Yes, we agree that some aspects of modern social justice ideology do mimic biblical virtues, so that we also have concerns for the marginalized. We also want to oppose oppression. We also have a desire for fairness and to treat everyone as equal and in the image of God. However, many of these modern-day movements are rooted in human wisdom and not in the wisdom of God. And they're rooted in a particular ideology called critical theory. Now, I don't often get political here in the pulpit, but the ideas of critical theory, they're man-made. It's an ideological framework which blends Marxism with postmodernism, and fundamentally, it misunderstands justice. So that critical theory, it seeks justice, but a justice that is divorced from the truth of God. For the ideas of critical theory reject the existence of God and says there is no God. In fact, the belief in God is part of the ideology of oppression. But once you divorce justice from truth, you just end up with manipulation and with confusion and with corruption. You remember what the Apostle Paul says in the opening chapter of Romans? He says, once you have rejected the truth of God, then instead of believing the truth, you believe the lie. And once you believe the lie, there really is no limit to the kind of things that you will do as a society. And that is exactly what our modern Western societies are experiencing now. We even invent new ways of doing what is wrong. We celebrate those who do it, for we have rejected the truth of God. And so once you divorce justice from truth, you end up with confusion. And our society has become incredibly manipulative, for that is how people try and achieve justice, by manipulation. Not by truth, but by manipulation and by confusion. So under the ideas of modern social justice ideas, truth, well, it all becomes subjective. And you can't have justice without truth. But if truth just becomes like a plate of jelly that just wobbles and is never solid, how can you have justice without truth? And so even to say some basic biological factual reality is enough to be called an oppressor. And under modern social justice ideas, any sort of authority structures are immediately suspect. So that any institutions that uphold laws or uphold science or uphold the family or uphold religion, they must be institutions of oppression. And so the goal then of critical theory, therefore, is a systematic upheaval, not a reform, but a revolution, an overturning of these institutions. And so according to modern social justice ideas, morality must be relative. Whatever you think is right and wrong doesn't necessarily have to be what I think is right and wrong. It is all relative. And any idea of absolute morality, of absolute right and wrong, is just an illusion. And ethics shift depending on people's identity, depending on group dynamics, not on any idea of transcendent, solid truth, and certainly not on the Word of God. And so group identity then starts to replace individuals. So instead of seeing people as people, instead of me interacting with you as you are, now we have to interact with each other on the basis of what group we belong to. And so that people are ranked then on a scale of virtue, depending on their group dynamics, of the oppressed and the oppressor, rather than the fact that we are all accountable to God. And some groups, of course, are deemed irredeemably evil, and others are absolved by virtue of their victim status. And you see, whilst modern social justice ideas, it might sound compassionate, its foundation is radically anti-Christian. Now, real justice, as the Bible describes it, depends on truth, ultimate truth, transcendent truth. And who is the ultimate truth? It is the one true and living God. It is from God that all truth flows, and it is from God that all justice flows. So therefore, Christians should not adopt modern ideas of social justice or of critical theory, even if we might see it as a useful tool, even if we might see some aspects of it as being very similar to what the scriptures speak of, for ultimately it is anti-God.